Hi guys, figured I'd do a little intro to this video since a lot of this footage in this particular video was shot at the same time as the video you guys first saw, making a barn find your new daily driver. And this kind of goes on, and it continues on with the project of actually fixing the car from this point forward now. That's the plan anyway. So kind of going through the braking system, how to properly fix a braking system in a car that's been sitting for a long time, going to making new brake lines, assembling drum brakes properly so they will function for you to drive it daily, fixing the front brakes, and looking at kind of condition of parts too, seeing if there's parts you can use, parts you can't use, kind of what determines which one is which. In a lot of cases, there are some good parts you can keep using for the future, depending on how good the vehicle was to start with. So along with that, I also have a little funny video to show you guys here in a second. So after I posted my last video and kind of between Facebook and some of the Facebook AMC groups and on YouTube, obviously, I had the previous owner reach out to me and send me a little clip. He figured you guys might enjoy on the channel, so you should put this in the next video. And I figured, I was like, heck yeah, I can't not do that. So here you guys go. So as you guys can see, we may have found the culprit to where all the dust came from and the frame rails and everything else in the car. In the last video I was cleaning out, and still currently cleaning out in this video you're gonna watch, and the next one. So, but you know, the end days having fun with an Eagle, that's the main goal of it in reality. So, but anyway, I'll quit my jabbering over here. You guys enjoy the show. Well, I was working through this time lapse here for a second. I did notice something. So I'm actually not gonna throw away the e-brake cables. So I got them all through running stuff. Obviously, you guys saw that in time lapse for a second there. Got them all the way down to right here. And then I pulled in the cables here, and I see that they actually go in and out pretty nicely on both of them. I'm gonna actually unbolt them proper like, and I'll save them for a later date in this case. I'm gonna put e-brakes on something, but I don't need them on here. So I'm not sure if this one still moves, so I'm just gonna leave this bracket on the car, and I'll pull the horseshoes out, pull these out right here, and save them. Anyway, you see I got the exhaust tailpipe off. As you can see, it's definitely seen better days. We got holes right here, we got holes right there, we got all the holes up on this side, the bottom side, some grass on a lot of it, and holes right there. Definitely time for a new one. So we'll get the e-brakes out of here quick, and then I'll, as you guys saw, get the brake lines off too, which weren't too bad to do. Basically breaking them off there, pushing into everything, and leaving it so we just have the ends right here on this block right here. So I'll put a socket, pull these two out of here, and then we should be able to save this hose, and these won't come out of here with a socket, and we'll probably have to just vice grip them, and then we'll put the lens on the lens we're going to install. I figured I'd save that mount to see how good it is when I get the exhaust. If it's too junk, I'll throw it away too. And now that we got all that stuff out of the way, we'll try to get these ends out of our hose right here. So one thing I'll always say too is make sure you use a 6-point on this, because when your line wrench didn't do the job, a non-6-point option is not going to help anything either. So a little easier on a let's say a two-wheel drive AMC. In the case of an Eagle, is a spring over axle set up in the back, whereas like a say anything from a Rambler American, 69 AMX, Javelins, Hornets, Gremlins are all, the spring is underneath the axle housing, whereas an Eagle's on top. This is how they did the lift kit on an Eagle to give it the 3 inches, I think it's 3 or 4 inches higher overall. I don't know the exact number top of my head, but anyway, it's a couple inches, got a lift kit anyway. This is how they did the lift kit, was putting the spring on top of the axle, dropping the axle housing down, away from the body. So a regular car you're used to seeing, this will be on the bottom, and your rear end will be on top of it up here. So then you're just going to have your U-bolts to be over the top of the housing, so a little bit more room for activities on this block right here. But otherwise, pretty much everything I'm doing here applies to all of the AMCs across the board, not just this Eagle I'm working on, because they all have very similar stuff on all of them. It's not just this one as a individual, I should say. There it goes. You can see how much better a socket works on this in this situation than a line wrench. A line wrench works the best, obviously, and when you have lines that aren't rusted out is what you want to use. In this case, we're gonna have to make new lines regardless after looking at them, and I'm glad I pulled them off. There. And just like that, line piece came out. And same thing over here, I'll do the same thing. You kind of put this up like this, and then comes right loose. Hence making it look a little easier than it did on the last time with the line wrench. So, and then now we can actually possibly use these ones if we get the line on, because they're not so rounded off. When they're rounded off, they're not really a usable system anymore because they're just too rounded off to actually use. And thinking about it, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to toss these back in the hole. I'm actually going to squeeze these down for a second. Make sure we don't get any dirt or grime in here. I'm just going to put these back in the holes for right now, just so there's no dirt can get in the brake line system. So pull the cylinders out of the car, because I'm going to be pounding on stuff a little bit with those probably to get them out, since they're a little more stubborn, most likely anyway. So, but this is kind of just part of how it works. Even if as rust free as this car is, this brake line stuff is just not already garbage, because it's been sitting too long. That's what it is. So this car was in 2009, so it's only been sitting about 15 years. I mean, think about that from a vehicle that's been sitting since the 80s. It was garbage. Like all your old muscle cars and stuff, you got to go through all of this stuff, or it's not really the safest to be driving around, truthfully. So, but we'll get the wheel cylinders busted out here quick, get them out of the way, and then I'll clean the vacuum plates, and we're ready to put new wheel cylinders in and start making brake lines. So for the wheel cylinders overall, these are a 1/2-inch bolt. Sometimes these bolts are pretty stubborn, but as you can see, they seem to not be too bad. Then more or less, I just kind of tap the housing itself out here, since you don't really care about it anymore. Alright. And then you just fish it out of the hole. And there you go. So now we got all that stuff clean. I also wanted to point out something that's overlooked a lot of times. So obviously you got all this stuff clean. Obviously you want that to sit nice, but you also want to make sure you clean this stud right here too. So the brake shoes should sit against this area right here. So you want to make sure it's nice and clean and not full of scale. Kind of like how I have it right here is an acceptable amount of rust on it. It's not a big deal. But the shoe sits right here with a cup on both sides. And then also you have a little plate that sits on this stepped up area right here. This plate right here, for instance. This little guy. So you can see the shoes have that cup sits right there, and this one sits right here. And this has to sit nice and flat on this piece right here, like that. I gotta clean this a little more yet. I haven't finished cleaning up all of it. It's gotta sit nice and flat in this area right here for the springs to go on easily, because the springs sit on this pin right here. So if you got scale and rust on that, and this plate doesn't sit all the way flat, you're gonna end up with it cockeyed and your springs are not gonna go on. You're gonna be like, Stefan made it look so easy on the video, why the heck isn't it working for me? And that'd be why. So that's more of a problem on rustier cars, probably if you're out west or something like that, or not in the rust belt area. Probably not something you really have to worry about, because your stuff, I imagine, is pretty dang nice. Though I will say, when you have brake fluid that does leak around inside these drums, it does make a similar kind of rust that we have here in Minnesota. So I mean, you could be in California and things all full of rust and slime and rusty brake fluid, it'll be all crusty exactly the same way. So, but I also got that done. So now we're gonna do some cleanup of some of our components right here. I'm gonna pull the self-adjusters apart, make sure these are nice and clean, to get them nice and greased. I am gonna put a hardware kit in this. I wasn't going to, but some of these nails look kind of crusty, and I just don't like the way they look. So I might just save these parts for something else, like a parts car or something like that, or a car. It's more of a car that moves around the yard or something like that, where you want some brakes in it. Probably not the best for a daily driver. It'd be fine, truthfully, but I don't want to have to be doing this again in the near future, where I have these last for 5-6 years at least before I got to touch them again. So anyway, and also your pins right here. So these sit in the boots on the end of the wheel cylinders. I can think of the word there for a second. Kind of just like this. And they push right in the end like that, and that's what they kind of just sit in that rubber. Push again, the there's a piston, basically 2 pistons inside of here, so the fluid runs in, and it takes two pistons and spreads them apart, pushing the brake shoes out to the drum. That's basically what this wheel cylinder does. So when you have these all rusty and crusty in the boot, they don't sit right. They should just be clean in general, and then put a little bit of lubricant on them so they don't get all crusty like this again next time. So basically making all this stuff last with a little bit of lubricant or oil on it is your best chance. Same with these. We put grease in these all the time, because you also want to make sure any self-adjuster that this tip right here rotates freely away in relation to the threads right there. The threads have to move too, but this has to be able to sit freely on there. This actually is a cap that just sits on there. It's kind of like a cup style deal. It's hard to do this with one hand. But anyway, it's got a stud like this, has to be clean. There also is a washer right there. And what that does is it allows basically a non-friction surface. So you basically have, if you have just that cap on there against this, it'll grind into the top of this wheel right here. But the washer in there, it kind of creates a surface where this can move along with this, which allows everything to move a lot smoother even when it has lots of pressure on it. So it's kind of more of a freewheeling device with that washer being able to float on top of the washer and make everything happen. So we're going to clean these up. I'll get these nice and wire wheeled, and then I'll grease the top portion right here, put grease in the threads. That way everything can move nice and smoothly. So that way you can adjust your brakes if you need to. This is a little cog where you catch your brake tool on to adjust drum brakes. Once you pull the little plug out, like this one right here, and this is your little adjuster tool, you basically keep hitting that cog with as you go through. And for a lot of you guys that are used to drum brakes, this probably isn't anything new, obviously. There's a lot of people that have a lot of issues with these and don't have as most amount of fun. They hate drum brakes with a burning passion, and they're not all that bad. I mean, there's a lot of good things about them. I mean, they work very well. I mean, think about it. I mean, semis have them. A lot of newer trucks even still have them. So there's, you know, I guess not so much anymore. Probably 10 years ago, they still had drum brakes and some stuff, but drum brakes are still widely used, and they're not that bad to work on. With the right tools, they're a pretty simple setup to play with, truthfully. So, though I am glad there's disc brakes on the front of most AMC cars after about 75, because they're nice to have the discs in the front. I'm not going to lie to you there. But anyway, I'm going to get the rest of the stuff cleaned up, and then we'll put the wheel cylinders on. I'll show you guys those. Put the wheel cylinder in first, and I'll start making my brake lines. So I'll show you guys how I do all that, how I'm flaring everything, making it all work, and the easiest way to make brake lines so you don't have to make them twice. Because I mean, aside from obviously leaving the fitting off after you flare it, get both ends nice and flared, and then you're missing a fitting on there, and you're swearing at yourself because you make dumb decisions sometimes. I mean, I think we all have done that at least once or twice. I know I've done it at least 30 times, so it's usually when I get the perfectly bent line too is when it happens. But I mean, that's what it is. So we'll get moving, and then I'll show you guys some progress along the way. We got all our self-adjusters cleaned up and everything else ready to go. So I got my pins cleaned up, wire wheeled. I got these all nice and greased. Got plenty of grease on the cap right there, also on the threads, so we're not worried about it. And then all the rest of the stuff's pretty good. I gotta wire wheel my cables SC yet. Otherwise, everything else should be pretty much in the spot we need. There are two new wheel cylinders, obviously left and right. As you can see, they're not a symmetrical setup. They have to be per side. So this would be a passenger side, and this would be a driver's side. So that way the lines are on the back side of the rear end. We got our spring kit. This is our spring kit. This is the ones I usually use, H7064. So anyway, we're gonna start putting the new shoes on, which are in the box right there. I'm not pulling them out quite yet. Get those mounted on there after I put the wheel cylinders in first, which I'm going to put some grease in the bolts. I'll install those in a couple seconds. Then we'll put the shoes on, get kind of the brakes all set up. Then we'll build the lines after that. So, as you can see, more or less kind of line them up. And just kind of shove them in the hole just like this. Kind of sneak them by on the back side over here. Which isn't too bad to do. It's pretty self-explanatory. Then realizing you forgot the bolts and the counters, you go back and get them. And obviously, I like to put lots of grease on them like this, like I always do. So I just dip them right in the bin, our grease bin, and then shove them in the hole. That way next time you do this job, you can pull them apart. It's always nice to think of your future self once in a while. You know, just kind of handy. It's like that, pull the cylinders in. So I'll get the camera moved to the outside here, and I'll start putting our shoes and the rest of our other fun stuff on. This is what I was talking about. I was talking about sanding the front rotors anyway. Just use an orbital sander or DA. It sands them down so you get that finish kind of like this. Not quite done yet, obviously, but you get that kind of finish right there. So it's workable for brake pads to reseat on them basically and be able to stop properly without rust. All right, now we got everything all set up right here. First thing I'm going to start with is these little pusher pins that go out of the side of the wheel cylinder. Basically, they just kind of pop right into the boot. You can probably can't hear it because of the DA in the background, but they kind of pop in and they'll kind of sit there. But a little bit of grease on them ensures they actually will sit there and do their thing properly. Next thing, I'm going to put the back shoe on and the front shoe on. One thing I always remember on the AMC rear ends is brake shoes. You can see how one has more material than the other, right here. The one with the more material is always the back shoe. The one with the top right here gone, that's going to be your front shoe on the front side of the axle. That's always how that's set up. So when you're ready to go, get your nail right here, fresh nail, pushing it from the back side like this. One of these cups goes on, actually cup goes on after. So then put this through and go right in this hole right here, as you can see in the picture. This will line right up with that up here. Stubborn, there we go. Now it'll kind of not really sit there the best. You kind of got to be fast at what you're doing here, let it hang by itself. Cup on the bottom like this on these springs, and another cup on top just like that, just like so. They'll kind of sit there. They're kind of made to stay with them to some extent. Not 100% though, as you guys just saw. And then your cup tool right here. And kind of just slide it over the top of this nail right here, holding it from the back side, just like this. Put your cup tool on, and just kind of line up the nail right there like this. Push it on, and slide it over like that. Now that shoe is ready to go. And it kind of sits up like this in the hole properly. So you'll kind of want to slide down until you have everything together, actually, but it's just kind of how it's set up currently. I'm more or less about right there, about what's going to sit, and when it's in the proper location when it's done. So meantime, it's going to kind of float around a little bit and be a pain in the butt until you get that far. After further analysis on the shoes here, why they were sitting kind of funky in the video you guys just saw, I actually have the wrong nails in this one right now. You can kind of see how the springs are further out above the shoes. That obviously won't work in this case. And also over here too, that there's two different, this is a V8 and a 6-cylinder kit. So there's shorter nails for a 6-cylinder rear end. I totally forgot about this. Because I'm usually used to working on AMXs, which 79 and 80 AMXs actually have V8 brakes on the 6-cylinder rear end using the long nails. So I just don't think about it in the back of my head. But anyway, so most 6-cylinder rear ends though use the short nails and have these small narrow brakes, as opposed to the 79 AMXs have the V8 style shoe that you guys probably used to seeing majority of the time. So anyway, I had the wrong nails in here, so that's one mistake that you don't want to make, is these won't work properly and these will fold around way too much. So, and you can see I can obviously like push this spring in and like take this off with my fingers. You should not be able to do that. You should be having to use this tool right here. Otherwise the shoes will not sit properly. Alright, now time to put the nails on the correct ones. So pull this stuff back apart for a second. I guess I can just do my fingers truthfully because they're not that tight. I gotta say, what I find amusing is I actually ended up grabbing both of the same nails that were wrong. The first time I grabbed this stuff. It's actually impressive. There we go. That's a little more how it should be. And you can see the shoe wants to sit up here a lot nicer. It doesn't want to kind of fold off to the side. It kind of wants to sit where it's supposed to, which is, you know, obviously this one wants to keep folding over here, which is not where it's supposed to be sitting. So that's just because of the nail length. Basically, it doesn't make it sit where it's supposed to sit. Worked all right though. It's a common mistake. It gets made actually. So, or that you know, something to look at that is a common mistake that could be made, I should say. So. Put your little cable holder over here on this side in place. I like to put a little grease behind it too, that way it turns a little bit when it needs to. Right, this little piece down here which hooks in this hole at the bottom, just like that. This is your cable. Gotta put your plate on first though. Again, if you can't tell, I enjoy my grease, so that way everything comes apart later. Put that up there like that. And this kind of sits down in the hole just like this behind the spring, and goes down here to sit, hook on this plate down here to run the self-adjuster. And again, we're back at it with that special tool again. Take this spring, this end of it right here, hook it in a piece like this, slide it back up. And there's a little hook edge on the bottom of this piece right there. You can kind of see, hook on your nail, go like this over the top, just like that. pull your spring up. Eventually it'll slide down like that. Go on there like that. So it's not as easiest to do, but it does work. So and now you can see this shoe is sitting where it's supposed to sit with this spring installed now. When you're doing the springs too, you want to make sure you put the front spring on first. I'll show you guys why in a couple seconds here. So basically catch your hook tool on the side of this, pull that up. Let some of the stuff fall apart for a second, that's just kind of part of the game. Still got our grease in the back side like I said about before. Put that up in the hole there. This cable kind of goes in the back side, kind of in the notch. And put this spring on second. And once I get this installed, I'll show you guys why we're doing it this way. There we go. Sometimes they try to chill a little bit, see how it goes. But now you can see our shoe is sitting a little more where it's supposed to be, up here on top of everything, proper location. There we go. That's pretty cool. It's kind of caught against this nubbin on the bottom right there. Anyway, what this is for is that way your self-adjuster cable right here, as you can kind of see, sits down here like this. I'll zoom in the video. Anyway, this cable right here has to kind of float a little bit back here. So unless you have this spring on first, this one doesn't have the room to let... This one ends up against this little crimp portion of the cable right here. It doesn't allow it to float in the hole and work properly. So you need to make sure you put your front spring on first, then your back spring. But the cable loop goes on the first thing. First thing you do is the cable loop, front spring, and back spring. And that puts all this stuff in the right location to operate correctly on your drum brakes. So it's not too hard to do, more about just having the right process to do it, is basically what it is. And usually what I like to do is just take this and I'll kind of smack the cable over on the pin there kind of deal. That way it's in its free floating state over here for me to be to operate correctly. Now that we got all that set up, make sure your cable's in this little T-piece over here properly. Make sure all this is down here nicely. Then we can put our spring on the bottom right here, and then our self-adjuster. Our self-adjuster, usually I put them in all the way, so they're all the way like this. Then we can spread it out after we get going. It allows the spring to go in a lot nicer. So usually take this, kind of sits right in the bottom here like that. And kind of push these in as far as possible. You always want to make sure the star wheel is on the back side of the shoes, because that will match with where this cable, this piece goes to actually push it down like this as you're backing up. And your spring goes in over here, like so, and pops over into this bracket. And when you're all the way pushed in like this, you can get that spring in by hand, and then obviously you can go like this, spread your shoes back out where they need to be. And then, truthfully, when this cable's in the right location, which it's not right now, which is why it made it so easy, you can also go like this too and pry up from the self-adjuster. Gives you a nice angle to kind of get it right inside the spot to seat correctly like this. And you're sitting in it nicely, your spring is all on, and in this case, you can actually take this like this, and this will actually turn your self-adjuster, like you can see right here where it's catching the cogs. That's how it's meant to operate. And once you get your drums on, we can adjust how all this stuff sits and how tight it is from these plugs in the backside back here. Sure. You can kind of see the holes will be right here on the bottom side of the backing plate. That's more or less how drum brakes go together. I'll give you guys a nice little overview with the phone here so you can see kind of how everything's situated. I know the GoPro footage didn't show it the best, but there's not really a good spot to put it since you're working kind of both sides of your body. It's kind of nice to just put it wherever it needs to, off of one side and kind of work, and then I'll show you guys a little more once I'm done. So anyway, this is kind of how it's all set up as I talked about. So it's going to be this spring first, and this kind of has a little hook piece that goes inside that hole right there. This spring first goes on top of the pin, as you can see back here. Or I should say, the cable goes on first. So this cable, it has the loop. So you put the plate on, this metal plate, then this loop cable, which goes down this way, It goes around the outside of this piece over here. And as you can see, it's got kind of like a cup deal in it, so it kind of holds this cable in there to run the self-adjuster. And this cable goes down onto this piece right here, which that little wheel here runs the self-adjuster just like that. As you can see, it's turning it lightly. This spring sits in the shoe down here and hooks into this. Your two springs and your nails go right here, and this spring right here goes through the center hole of this piece and up to here. And obviously you want to make sure your pieces in here are hooked on the shoe, which they would before you started, or it wouldn't sit right. So that's more or less all that set up. And what you're gonna do is you'll actually put your drums on, you'll spin them, and they're gonna freewheel like nothing's even happening, just like how this axle is right now. What you're gonna do is you're gonna keep adjusting this till the drums go on, and they're kind of just a hair tight, and they have a little bit of drag when you turn them. That's more or less in the spot you want them to kind of be when you're finished up with them. You can obviously do adjusting from the back side, but it's easier just to do it from the front side in that case. Also, one thing to remember too is make sure you leave one side intact if you're not familiar with drum brakes. That way you can pull the drum off the other side and look, okay, that's how it's all assembled, as long as the guy did it before you knew what he was doing too. Or you can watch this video and you can see how it looks anyway. But anyway, that's how drum brakes work. I'm gonna put the other side together quick. So both these are done, and then we'll move on to making brake lines. All right, now we're gonna start out with some brake lines. So we're gonna do the long one first, since I have this piece right here, it's just about the right length. So usually I like to do, obviously straighten it out first, see what we got for a length here. We obviously got plenty right here without cutting a bunch off the roll. We know we have to come down on this side anyway, so usually what I'll do is I'll start out probably just cutting this piece shorter first in reality, because it's entirely too long to work with what we're doing. So kind of take a second. So you kind of got to be up in this area. We know that portion. So we'll just give her a nice little kind of uphill right there for a second. We'll make this fit a lot better if we don't. General length's going to be that way. We also got to know we got to go over the top of the axle like this. Bear with me here. This will look a lot cleaner once we're done. So, and then we'll go over here. That'll be about that long. And we'll get plenty of length out of that when we're done. So, something like that. We'll cut this off, then we'll start working with it. Since this is the driver, I'm not super concerned with how awesome this thing looks. I'm not going to make it look bad by no means, but we're not going to go perfection mode like it would on our show car. Put it that way. So obviously you got to go under the piece over here about the right way. I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put my fitting on this side first. That way I can kind of screw it into the wheel cylinder and know where it's going to sit nicely, and I'll work from there. Otherwise everything's going to be floating around on me, kind of just moving wherever it wants to. So that's why, guys, actually we make brake line ends. So for a lot of years, for most of my life, we've used this tool right here, which is probably what a lot of you guys have when you see. And these work plenty well, and they still have their place, obviously, for my mobile applications, like you're trying to flare a tool in the inner fender over there, like we did on the far side of the car. But we actually bought this one. I think this was last year or something like that, I believe. 2 years ago. Anyway, we build a lot of lines, so it's handy. This actually has 2 dies in it like this. So anyway, this is a pretty expensive tool, though. This is about $200 and some tool we actually bought to do this with, but we do a lot of them, so that's kind of what it is. And it makes the job a lot nicer in that case. It actually has a set portion of it, so you stick your line in kind of like this. And I know if the guy's screaming over the camera right now, put your dang fitting on the line there. I haven't quite got that far yet. I'm just straightening it out, so here we go, guys. So, anyway, put your flared side first like this. Kind of set it in there. And since it's bent a little bit, it's fighting me for a second, but put your two different setups right there. Slide this over the top. Push your pin back. And you kind of tighten this down lightly. It kind of tightens up the piece. Put in your set motion first. And that actually pushes the pipe down into the die to the correct depth it needs to be to make the proper flare. Tighten that down a little more. It's got 2 other operations. So we got a 3/16 line. You do operation 1. Push her in there. Pull her back like that. That's done. Operation 2. That does your return flare. And just like that, that brake line flare. Perfect brake line flare. So nice easy setup that way, works really dang well, but it's an expensive tool to buy, but it makes this job a lot faster and you're making lots of brake lines, which we do a lot of brake lines and gas lines and just a lot of stuff like that. So now we got our brake line fitting down on this side. Pop our cap out on the driver's side over here. And we'll actually screw this one in. Like that. That way it's kind of in a spot where it's going to be stuck right there. And our last little slide like this. Just like that. Yeah, so then just temporarily get it a little more tight once you kind of have your general shape done with. And I can get out my pipe bender and go nuts with this thing, like I usually do. That's how I make brake lines on race car engine bays. You've seen Pete's car under the hood. And where the line lock sits, you kind of see what I usually do on more of our show car stuff. But since it's going to see a lot of salt and everything else, I'm not going to get too carried away with making perfect lines. And they'll be rusty in about a month. So, one thing you always want to do is make sure you leave plenty of line over here underneath this axle housing portion right here, so it happens next time when you want to change your wheel cylinder, it's a problem. You don't have to make a whole new line. You can just actually extend it out a little bit, put a new end on it if you need to. It's the biggest thing. So it's nice to leave that option for yourself later when you're working on this. Now I'll go up like this and kind of tuck into the top of the axle here a little bit. I'll bring this down a little bit more right here. Kind of like that. Tuck that in real nice. And what we're going to do is give it a little bit of a ripple on this side over here too. So I'm add a little ripple over here. Leave myself a little extra line for next time. And the ability to screw it in easier. Now we have a ripple made over here, we can kind of play with our length on it. And you're just about the right length like that. You went around your vent right here, we have the ability in this ripple right here to kind of adjust this as you're assembling it. So now that we're the right length, now we're going to go through here and actually put our other end on it. And we're ready to have a brake line. So this is kind of the driver quality version. Like I said, if I was working on an actual show car, I'd actually do more smooth bends. I'd actually straighten it out perfectly straight first and do some nice perfect bends on everything with my two benders. But this will work plenty good for what I'm doing in this case. So, and now we got our line all ready to go. I got my flares on both ends. We're ready to pull our fitting out over here and install it. So, like this. As you can see, this is a little bit short now. But now that I have this angle over here that I talked about, I can just kind of stretch it a little bit, put it in the hole here. Got my regular 3/8 wrench, kind of get a little bit of tension where it needs to be put. So now we're sitting nice right there. That'll have a holder. Alright, there we go. There's a generally easy brake line bending anyway, and then I'll float there a little bit. I'll have a holder on this side. Kind of sitting nice and down like that as you're looking for. So I had a zip tie right here. I'll probably put one of those back on there, or a muffler clamp, one of the two to hold nice tight to the axle. That'll work well for driver quality anyway. We got it all tightened down the block right there, the muffler clamp on and the hose clamp on it right there. I had a nice rubber isolated clamp I have for wiring. I use one of those. They're all tight over here. Driver side brake line for the rear end is all installed. Ready to go. There's the S shape I was talking about. So, looks a pretty nice line. But I was going to show you guys one thing. So as you can see, we don't have a lot of real estate right here to make this corner. It's a pretty tight corner up against the spring right here, so it's going to be pretty hard to make this corner. So kind of one of the things I like to do is obviously I'm going to put this on first before you do any kind of bending. Then what I like to do is find some kind of block or whatever. This is a factory block you have on the inside of the engine bay of an AMC. Install on there just like this. Now we got something to kind of hang on to. And grab something like a breaker bar or something that's decent kind of bend radii diameter, we'll say. You kind of hold it right there, right after the line. You can do a nice tight bend off of that without kinking the line off. Because if you try to do it by hand, you'll end up actually making a nice sharp kink right here. Usually I lose a glove on the end with the block, because these blocks are sharp as heck. And you kind of just keep it right on the edge like this. Give yourself a little bit of room. And get yourself your nice tight bend radii right off of that. And I'll get you what you want. Give you the support you need to make a nice tight bend to get you out where you are right now. Hence that 90 I made right there, or past 90, which is actually not at all kinked, as you guys can tell in the video here. So that's an easy way to do that without having the issue where you're kinking the line and you're getting irritated, then you gotta start over again. Well, as you guys saw while I was doing the brake lines in the back, that's work on the brakes in the front. Already got the driver's side done. Got the fresh hose put on up there. Brand new caliper. We're using the original pads since they had plenty of meat left on them, and they are riveted ones, and it is a daily driver. So we'll get these worked on a little bit, and then we can obviously when they get junk we'll change them. But and we got the rotors to clean up pretty nicely like that. So over here my dad's working on this side. Obviously got the slide areas nice and greased up, because you want to make sure you do that, nothing or they won't slide properly. New lines on over here. And what do you got going over here?
I already sanded to both sides of the rotor. Made sure I got my red mark to line it up back where it was. The stud is marked on the car. So there's a little red line here in the stud. So in case there's any buildup on the back side, that it won't make it sit crooked on there. But I've already scraped this and scraped the hub and cleaned it. But just in case there should be something built up, that's something you should always be doing, is cleaning the back of this and the face on the hub on the vehicle. So that no matter what, your rotor sits flat against the surface and doesn't end up crooked. The ends of these right here, so they slide back and forth, and I'm going to sand the face of the shoes. I wouldn't reuse these pads normally, but they're not bonded, they're actually riveted, and they're very nice yet and in good condition. So we're going to go ahead and use them with these rotors since they're on the car. And I guess, you know, since it is just a personal car and a daily driver, we'll give it a whirl and use up as much of it as we can first. So I'm going to re-scuff the surface so they have a good bite and they don't have any glazing.
I finished with the brakes last night anyway. Got the brake line on the back of the rear end here. I got this line all finished up, as you guys saw. My dad finished up the calipers in the front. He's got these all ready to go. And like I was talking about too, make sure you're greasing these areas up here on the actual caliper mounts for the pads to slide nicely and they don't get caught. And then also you can greasing up your slides so the caliper floats nicely right here. You can kind of see on those pins right there where it's going back and forth. And that made these pins right here. This is what makes the calipers on the 82 and later cars not work, is this pin gets rusty and gets caught, and then the caliper will not slide, and that's where you get locked up calipers from. Well, thank you guys for watching the channel. If you enjoyed what you saw, hit that like button, smash the subscribe button there too. We'll catch you all later.